Different, not less. That's how prominent author and speaker Temple Grandin summed up inspiring stories of achievement and successful employment from adults with autism, ADHD, and learning differences. I'm Ajay Vijaya. Hello and welcome to a new edition of our series on neurodiversity with Dr. Banerjee, brought to you by Landmark College, the college for students who think, learn, and operate differently. Today, we explore the legal landscape surrounding neurodiverse students, understanding their legal rights and responsibilities, and shedding light on what the law outlines and how it impacts neurodiverse students and their families is none other than Dr. Manju Banerjee, Landmark College Learning Disabilities and Neurodiversity Ambassador at Large. Welcome, Dr. Banerjee.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Vijaya.
Always. Thank you for doing this for us. Really appreciate it. So, Dr. Banerjee, neurodiversity is not a legal term per se, but it includes individuals with learning disabilities, with ADHD and autism. So, can you explain for us what these terms really mean under the law?
Great question. Pardon me.
Bless you.
Thank you. And really helpful for parents to know what are the legal rights and protections under the law.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, absolutely correct. Neurodiversity is not a legal term, but it does include individuals with disabilities. So who is an individual with disability under the law? So under the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, ADA defines an individual with disability if they meet a three-pronged definition. One, does the person have a physical or mental impairment that significantly impacts one or more major life activity like walking, talking, and or bodily function that was added on when the ADA was amended? So for example, someone who uses a wheelchair has an impairment in ability to walk, which is a major life activity. The second prong of this definition is, do they have documentation of such a disability, such an impairment? So that is there a record of the impairment? And that's the documentation. And the third prong is, are they regarded as someone with an impairment? So the regarded is when someone or society perceives you as having an impairment. So that's the ADA. Now I want to
So do all of these three-pronged have to be there, or is it one or the other, or one or two?
One or the other.
One or the other. Okay.
So it's or this or this or this.
And even if you don't have a formal diagnosis, it's still okay. You'd still be considered as part of, if you had the other two.
As long as you have a record of that impairment. Now, the word documentation in my world has a very different connotation.
Yeah.
But as long as there's a record of the impairment, that you're considered a person having a disability.
I
but
see.
What I want to make clear is the ADA is a civil rights law. It's about non-discrimination. And that's the definition of an individual with disability. And any post-secondary or other organization that receives federal funds, because it's a federal law, falls under the purview of ADA. But when we get to schools, grade school, it's a little different. In grade school, it is about being able to access the general curriculum. So they often make this distinction and say, in post-secondary education, the law is about access, whereas in grade school, it is about success. That is being able to perform at the level of the general curriculum. So the law in grade schools is called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's IDEA. So ADA is different from IDEA. And IDEA has 13 different disability categories. I'll mention them later.
Mm-hmm.
But let me describe to you how IDEA defines learning disabilities, ADHD, and autism.
Mm-hmm.
So under IDEA, this is IDEA 2004, a specific learning disability, SLD, in reading, that is dyslexia, in math, dyscalculia, in
Mm-hmm.
writing, dysgraphia, is defined as a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding, I'm just reading the definition,
Yeah.
in understanding or in using language, spoken or written, and may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very stylized definition. It's a formal definition.
Yes.
But basically, what we look for is, as Sally Shavitz calls it, for learning disability, it is like um, a island of weakness in a sea of strength.
Whoa.
Yes, which
That's
I
deep.
love that. But unfortunately, that's not the legal definition. So the
Yeah.
legal definition is you have a disorder in
Yeah.
one or more basic processes involved in reading, writing, math, etc.
Uh-huh.
Under IDEA, ADHD is often covered under a category called other health impaired. Other health impaired.
Mm-hmm.
So if in your child's school support plan, you see the category of disability, and I'm using the word disability now and not learning differences, because learning
Mm-hmm.
differences is not a legal term.
Yeah.
So ADA falls under other health impaired.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Okay.
and, and the student's attention issues must meet the law's standard for qualifying for ADA. And that includes the fact that they need supports to meet the general curriculum or to
Right.
access the general curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then autism, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just, I didn't know there were so many, the legalese to all of that, and they were all categorized such. So it's really mind blowing to just listen to how it's all done. And so before we go ahead, let me tell folks who've just joined us that you've tuned into Neurodiversity with Dr. Banerjee only on Radio Zindagi 1550 AM. And of course, this is brought to you by Landmark College, that combines research based learning strategies and academic support to prepare students for the rigors of college level work. And they are, of course, based in Vermont, but they have a successful success center right here in Bay Area in San Mateo. And you can find out more about them by visiting, it's very simple, landmark.edu/success center, or call them at 408-505-4170. And today we're talking to Dr. Banerjee. We're delving into the legal framework around neurodiverse individuals, what the various terms mean under the law, and what you need to know, whether you are a member of the society or you are a parent or a caregiver of the neurodiverse. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Banerjee.
Sure. So we described, and the term that's used for learning disability is specific learning disability in reading, specific learning disability in writing,
SLD. Uh-huh.
SLD, reading, writing, math. And
Oh.
I told you about ADHD, which often falls under the category of other health impaired
Uh-huh.
under IDEA. And autism, as you know, is a spectrum disorder. So it lies along a spectrum. And it is a developmental disorder that significantly affects either your verbal, nonverbal communication, and social interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And typically should be manifest before the age of 3. And
Oh.
it adversely impacts the child's academic performance.
Mm-hmm.
So we have very clear legal definitions.
Yes. Yeah.
Right,
So very
right.
clear. So what are the special education services and the individualized education program that public schools offer? What are they all about, and how does a child really qualify for these special ed services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is IDEA for short, IDEA?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So it's interesting that you asked this question because most Southeast Asian parents don't want their son or daughter to qualify for special education. Because again, as I mentioned in the previous session, it often comes associated with stigma.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
But I want to say that special education can really be your friend. What special education in schools refers to is a range of services, which includes accommodations, modifications, etc., but a range of services that become available. So that's your right under the law when you qualify as a student with disability.
Yeah.
So IDEA is the federal law that defines and regulates special education. And public schools are mandated to provide special education services to any child between the age of 3 and 21 if they meet two criteria. Criteria 1, they must fall under one of those identified disability categories of IDEA, and I'll mention those in a minute. Secondly, they must need special education to access the general curriculum. Let me break up that sentence a little bit. What does that second one mean?
Yeah.
That means if they are in the classroom in receiving general education and they're not succeeding, and they are maybe a grade or 2 grades below in reading, in writing, in spelling, etc., that means they need supports to be able to access, that means to get at the content of the curriculum for their grade level. And the roadmap for those services that they need, the supports and the scaffolds, as I call them, that is special education. And it is defined by this program called IEP, Individualized Education Program. So it is essentially, it defines goals that the student must reach, objectives, their current level of performance, all of that, accommodations, etc. So think of it as a roadmap for helping your child succeed in the grade in which they are.
Yeah. So lots to consider there. And of course, folks, we're talking about all of the legalese that come with neurodiversity, how you want to understand it. And of course, this program has been brought to you by a Landmark College that offers a vibrant and personalized educational experience for students with learning disabilities through a variety of majors and online and summer programs. And they support the transition at college as well. They are based in Vermont, in Putney, Vermont, but they have a success center right here in San Mateo, in California. And you can check them out at landmark.edu/success center or call them today at 408-505-4170. And we're talking to Dr. Banerjee all about the legal ramifications, the legal framework that need to be really traversed in your journey as a neurodiverse student. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but Dr. Banerjee, tell us more about what parents should be aware regarding these special education services that you mentioned for neurodiverse students.
Yeah, so the first thing you have to make sure is you don't have antipathy towards special education. You have to keep an open mind.
Yeah.
What are these services? What do they offer? What are the rights that my student has? And I'm telling you why. Why? Because it creates a breadcrumb trail of support. If you have a history of having received these supports, it becomes easier for you to access supports in college, to access supports in the place of work. And depending on whether you're in school, college, or work, the supports will vary. But what special education in school does is provide you the right to access these supports. So you asked me, what are these supports? What kind of supports do you get?
Yes.
So the supports they start with, and we had talked about this, as you might recall in a previous session, is you get a referral if you're not doing well, and you go through a multi-tiered level of intervention where the school will provide more and more intensive intervention if you're not succeeding by yourself in the classroom. And if those interventions are still not helping you enough, then you will be referred for evaluation. And let's say the evaluation indicates that you have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Mhm.
So then that you will be most probably will be in the other health impaired category
Mhm.
under IDEA. And there are two plans I should have mentioned. There is the IEP, Special Education Plan, and there's also something called the Section 504 plan.
Mhm.
Now, the Section 504 is also a formal plan developed by the school, very similar to the IEP, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have the type of 13 categories of disabilities like IEP under IDEA.
Uh-huh.
So it is more similar to ADA. But again, these plans are a roadmap. They identify the goals that you want your student to reach. But the other important part for parents to remember is it is an interactive process. So parents are called to IEP meetings. They can bring advocates if they want. The students are also invited if they want to participate. Some students do, some students don't. But the parents have to sign off on the supports and the services that are going to be provided. And it's
Yeah.
all laid out either in the IEP or the 504 plan. The 504 is part of the Rehabilitation Act. And the big difference is that the Rehabilitation Act defines an individual with a disability very similar to the ADA. Whereas the IDEA, we have 13 categories that have specific definitions for these 13 categories.
Yeah. So let's talk about the 13 disability categories that you mentioned under the IDEA. But before that, let me tell folks that we are understanding the rights and accommodations and the responsibilities afforded to neurodiverse individuals within the the education system with Dr. Manju Banerjee. She's Landmark College Learning Disabilities and Neurodiversity Ambassador. And of course, this program is brought to you by Landmark College. And to learn more, just check out landmark.edu/success center. And so, Dr. Banji, yes, tell us about the 13 categories.
Yeah, the 13 categories under ADA, let's start with the first big one, specific learning disability, SLD. And if it's SLD in reading, then of course dyslexia, writing dysgraphia, and then math dyscalculia. So that's number one. Number two is the second big one, other health impaired, which typically includes attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but it could include others as well. Autism spectrum disorder, obviously, another one. Emotional disturbance, the students who have mental health issues fall under that category. Speech and language impairment, stuttering, for example, falls under that category. But speech and language could also include problems with expressive and receptive languages, for example. Visual impairment, including blindness, another category. Deafness, another category. Hearing impaired. And then IDEA kind of combines deaf-blind as a category. Orthopedic impairment, intellectual impairment, traumatic brain injury, and then the last category is multiple disabilities.
Wow,
So,
I never realized there were so many, all of these, they're
yes,
segmented into these categories.
absolutely, because these categories, and depending on which category you fall into, your services under the individualized education program will be tailored to your specific needs.
I see.
One thing I want my parents to remember is a very important takeaway is that while in school, your rights and responsibilities are described to you, both the parent and the student, by the school authorities. The schools have a mandate called the Child Find program. That means it is their responsibility to find who is not doing well in school and then identify if they have a disability and then provide services. In post-secondary education, it is your responsibility as the student to
So the
find.
onus is on you then in secondary education.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and even at the place of work.
Yeah.
So all that kind of falls off once you
Right.
you graduate from
Right.
school.
So let's talk about the accommodations for students with disabilities.
Oh, yes. So that is a big element. And accommodations are essentially modifications and adjustments to the curriculum or to your job requirements that help you perform the job for the place of work or help you access the general curriculum or access your course and plan of study in school. So the two words I want my folks in the audience to think about when they think about accommodations. One is the word reasonable. Under the law, the accommodations must be reasonable. That means they should not cause undue burden. That's the legal word, undue burden to the organization that is providing those accommodations. And it is the entire organization, not just one department or one office, for example. So let's talk about what are these accommodations.
Yes.
And they are broadly divided into 4 categories. So these are, think of them as changes to presentation, to response, to setting, and to timing and scheduling. So let's think now still in the context of school. Presentation of information, we typically, a teacher might be standing in front of a board and giving a lecture, and that might be difficult for a student with dyslexia to write down.
Yeah.
So a potential accommodation would be availability of teachers' notes or use of some assistive technology to take notes and record the lecture. Another accommodation for response is the opportunity to provide oral responses instead of a written response on a test, often requested. Setting accommodation is often when a student can request to take the test in a separate room or in a room with reduced distraction because of their ADHD, for example. And if the request matches up the challenges that they have because of their disability, then the organization, school or college is mandated to provide that. And the last one, as I mentioned, is timing. And this is the biggest accommodation request, both in school and in college by neurodiverse individuals. And that is extra time on a test.
Yes.
So typical goalposts are 50% extra time or 100% extra time. But in some cases, you can have multiple day testing. That can also be possible. And then with homework and other assignments, typically, depending on the scope of the homework, it could be 2 extra days or a week or so on. So accommodations, span the gamut. From extra time to audiobooks, to a recording of lectures, to a reader, to having a scribe or a writer write for you. There can be a whole variety of assistive technologies and support services. These are all the rights that students and parents must know about if they qualify.
Must know about. And I want to thank you, Dr. Banerjee. This has been such a phenomenal episode because I myself am new to this and I'm learning so much. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I feel we need to learn so much more, but you've put it all so well for us. And thank you. Valuable insights into the legal dimensions of neurodiversity in education. And we've covered a wide array of topics crucial for advocating for the students' rights. And undoubtedly, with this clearer understanding of the legal framework, parents and guardians can better advocate for their children's educational needs. So thank you so much. Really, always grateful to you. So, folks, do join us again next time as I talk to Dr. Banerjee on how parents of neurodiverse students, especially South Asian parents, can learn to manage their expectations. So, if you have any questions on this upcoming topic or any other aspect of neurodiversity for Dr. Banerjee, then send them to me at vijaya@radiozindagi.com. That's VIJAYA at radiozindagi.com. And of course, Landmark Colleges on hand every step of the way. If you are a neurodiverse student or a parent of one, visit them at landmark.edu/success center and learn more, or call them at 408-505-4170. And do join us every Thursday, 3:30 p.m. for another enlightening edition of Neurodiversity with Dr. Banerjee, brought to you by Landmark College. I'm RJ Vijaya, and for now, keep listening to Radio Zindagi. Jiye ja.